The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
It's time to go on the mat. The Cedar Valley's longest-running radio show devoted entirely to wrestling. Brought to you by Rolling Ford and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum on 1650 The Fan.
Welcome to On the Mat. I am Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, joined by our own Hershey Sunday Pie, Doug Van Gelder. Welcome, Doug.
I'm not that sweet.
Yeah, well, you are to us, believe me.
That is some good stuff.
Well, hey, I
you want to call me Hershey Pie, that's fine.
Yeah, but I got to put a plug in for Burger King because they have the best pies. Now, Village Inn has great pies, too. I don't want to slight them, and other places have great pies. I don't even know if IHOP serves pies, but a prepackaged pie, Hershey Sunday Pie at Burger King, I've never experienced anything like it for that type of price, for like $1.50.
Wow, that is outstanding.
It's incredible, and you had your first experience with it, and I think it passed with flying colors.
It did.
And if it does for you, that means that everyone should bombard Burger King just to give it a try.
I'm a gourmet because I had the sausage egg McMuffin followed by the...
Followed by that?
You know, you can always have those things anytime you want now, sausage egg McMuffin.
Yeah, breakfast all day. It works out perfect.
Now I had the pie to go with it, and that could be addictive.
Yeah, well, Scott gave a thumbs up for the pie. Both of you guys had the Hershey Sunday Pie, so it's truly remarkable that a prepackaged
this
pie
really
can be that
isn't fair
good.
to talk about food with all them hungry wrestlers out there.
Well, it is.
It might be listening.
It is fair to do that.
Okay,
but nonetheless, you got your first experience of that, and you got your first experience at an outdoor wrestling meet at Upper Iowa. Of course, you went to the one last year with the Grapple on the Gridiron, but the showdown at Sundown in Fayette. Your thoughts?
It was well thought out. I mean, it was a perfect little square to do it in. I loved it. I mean, everything was run really well, and it was kind of cool to see those guys have to go out and keep the dew down. Yeah,
it was a unique experience.
It was,
because it was getting wet
right
on the mat.
Dew point. Yeah. Right at the dew point.
Because that's the difference. That Iowa had a day meet. It was during the afternoon, and that certainly makes a difference in how you execute the meet because you have some sunlight.
Sure.
And that was certainly a problem. They were slipping around a little bit.
I would love to see more of them that way. It was a great atmosphere. You know, the guys don't get sweaty.
Yeah.
They just went out, and I mean, there was a little bit of slipping, but not too bad. Not too bad.
And
it was really a lot of fun for me. For one thing, it was Keith Slifka, who's the coach at Crestwood. His son was wrestling for Upper Iowa, and I used to coach Keith. So that was kind of one of the fun things. And then that other Sesker guy was there, that Kent.
Kent was there, yep.
We're going to have Craig on here shortly. But
Craig will be on the second segment.
You know, Kent and we had our picture taken together. That was kind of fun.
Good.
He did a great job entertaining the kids. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
Yeah, I did.
I thought it was fantastic. He was pulling those kids right into that match. And I thought that was, we need to see more of that.
Yeah, and he's a good official, too. On
yes.
top of that, he does a good job of controlling the mat and the match. And so it was a fun night. So kudos to Upper Iowa for doing that. And I think it's really the wrestling program that drove that event. And the more I read about wrestling, I got to give wrestling credit. I think they're getting a little bit more progressive in how they approach the sport. There was one, I can't remember what it was, but a college did sort of a dine and wrestle where they had a meal. And it was like a sit-down meal, and they had a wrestling match during that time.
During the time they were dining?
Yeah, while they were dining. I didn't read too much about it. I just kind of caught it as a headline.
Try something. Why not?
Yeah. The theater where they have it on a stage. I think that's a great idea.
I told you, I know I did that at least two different places when I was in high school. We did that.
On a stage?
On a stage.
Well, they did that at Western Intermediate a lot.
Well, West Intermediate, that when I was coaching, I know we went over there, but I don't know if they didn't. I mean, that was for the junior high, obviously.
Junior high, yeah.
So,
but it's memorable. You remember that
absolutely.
particular event because of the uniqueness of it.
I just love the way the seating unfolds right out there. You know, it is a performance. Why not have it in a performance theater?
Yeah. And the Beauty and the Beast is another concept that I think goes pretty well. I like. side by side with gymnastics. So
no, was that Kevin's
concept.
idea?
Oh, I don't know if it was Kevin Jackson's idea. I don't know who came up with it. I know KJ got on board with it a couple of years ago. They did one when Kyvan was still wrestling, but I do like that concept. It's great for both programs and gets additional people thinking about both sports.
Yeah.
Not necessarily saying that either side will become wrestling fans or gymnastics, but I had never been to a gymnastics meet until that, and it got me there, and it was fun to watch, and I can remember some of what happened. So I think that's always a positive when you can have that.
Last year, I mean, the whole Iowa program with, having Oklahoma State at the wrestling, and the football team going undefeated. I mean, they were on a real roll last year.
Yeah,
they were. The Hawkeyes upsetting the Cowboys, and then the Hawkeyes football team going undefeated through the whole regular season.
Oh, it played a huge part in it because there was a lot of momentum going into that.
Big.
Yeah, you just had to think, because if you did it this year, maybe the momentum isn't there as much.
Wouldn't be as much fun.
Yeah,
I don't think.
There was a lot of buzz going around the football program. So, not saying there isn't right now with them beating Michigan on a great game. Congratulations, Iowa, on that. That was a huge win for the University of Iowa.
My son Bo got to go to that.
Did he?
Said it was an outstanding thing to be at.
Did he rush the field?
I did not. I didn't ask him that.
I'm guessing he didn't, but it would be fun to know if he took after his old man.
I'll ask him and report on it next time.
All right. But, hey, you mentioned one of our guests, Craig Sesker, is going to be on our final segment of the show. He's written some books, has a new book called Wrestle Like a Girl about female wrestling, and we're going to dive into why he got behind that project and maybe talk a little bit about his previous books with Bobby Douglas and the Scott Catholic book that he's done. So get a chance to talk with Craig. And then for whatever reason, I love talking to Jeff Byers, the voice of Penn State wrestling.
He's got that type of voice. It just pulls you in.
It pulls you in, but he's very knowledgeable, and he gives you great insight. And when you have the top program in the nation in Penn State, 5 out of the last 6 NCAA championships, I just want to hear what he has to say, because I'm sure you're like me. I love knowing what lineups are. I think that's just as exciting as the wrestling meet itself. It's just knowing who's going to compete, who's going to be in the lineup, who's battling for spots.
He knows each one of them so well.
He does. So I don't know if the 18-minute segment we have will be able to suffice for all that we want to ask him. But Jeff Byers, every year we have him on, every year I get excited to learn more about Penn State wrestling and the insight that he's going to provide. And, of course, the question I think everyone wants to know, and I doubt he'll be able to answer it, but he'll at least give us insight, is Mark Hall going to redshirt? Mark Hall is the guy that I think a lot of people want to see compete and wrestle. He's a true freshman this year. Won a tournament recently over the weekend. He's right now his red shirt is on. He's not officially certified to compete for Penn State. But my opinion is, I think by the end of the season, you're going to see Mark Hall's red shirt come off, and he's going to wrestle. And Penn State keeps getting the talent too. It's incredible. It does. It's very reminiscent of what the University of Iowa was in the 80s, where it was just the juggernaut. You wanted to go to the University of Iowa. I think Penn State has that flavor right now, and especially with some of the recruits. But Iowa did get the number 1 recruit in the nation in Spencer Lee, and believe me, that is going to generate a lot of buzz when he wrestles. I mean, that's Metcalf caliber energy. He's still in high school this year. But when he steps on the mat for the first time in an Iowa singlet, that's going to generate so much buzz for the University of Iowa.
Some guy tell me this guy is a 4-time national champion, without doubt. And he was a Hawkeye fan. So, he wants him to be, and that's a big part of it. If you get enough fans behind you, maybe it'll give you that over-the-top once.
Yeah, but there's just so much.
Nothing wrong with pressure.
And I agree, but there's so much that goes into it. I mean, Aymar, you could have said...
No injuries.
Yeah, I mean, you would have thought for sure he was going to be an undefeated 4-timer. We got pinned last year. You just don't know what goes into it. Now, do I think there's a good chance? Yeah, but there's so many factors that have to play out, and I would think that anyone in there that understands the sport would understand that nothing's guaranteed in wrestling. Absolutely nothing. And guys move up.
Just ask Mr. Burroughs.
Yeah. Ask anyone that...
It's a compelling article in Win Magazine that he did shortly after that. Did you see that?
I did. And he's always has good insight into how he thinks, and he's able to articulate it well.
It was.
Yeah. Missed you at the UNI meet.
Well, I was down seeing my dad. It was Veterans Day, and when I was down there, we talked about wrestling a little bit, but it was special for me to be there for him. He's a World War II vet.
Yeah. Well, as it should be.
They had to sing along. He can still sing. He praised me for my voice, so I don't know if his hearing's any good.
Well, hey, but it was a lot of fun to kind of exercise some of the things that happened last year for Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa did not win a home dual meet last year, and they had a chance to rectify that a little bit. I mean, beat Nebraska Kearney 43-0, and then beat Utah Valley University 24-12. Cooper Moore is probably out for the season at 165. Has an injury. I would guess he's not going to be back on the mat. Dylan Peters is not in the lineup yet either. So
still recovering. He had surgery, correct?
Correct. And I feel bad for Cooper most of all. Just that, what a great guy, and someone that you want to see succeed because he does things so well and executes so well. So possibility of a sixth year. I hope that it happened early enough that you might be able to see Cooper next year if he wants to compete. I know that's a big time commitment, and you have to be mentally checked into that. But if you like wrestling, you have to go to the Virginia Tech meet this weekend against Northern Iowa. Virginia Tech has a really solid lineup, and it's pretty remarkable when you can have that type of talent come to the West Gym. And Virginia Tech certainly has that, especially after last year's fourth-place finish, and I know they have expectations of doing something similar. When you have a team that got a trophy the year before and you return the majority of those guys into the lineup, you need to go watch that.
You've got some natural motivation coming your way.
Yeah, if that's not a packed house this Friday for the West Gym, I'll be incredibly disappointed because that's a meet that
they'll be
really
up
everyone
against
needs
the
to
football
see.
Again, but
It's a Friday. I mean, you think the high school football will deter?
I'm pretty sure they have championship games.
Well, yeah, but you think it'll deter enough fans that it might?
I don't know
hurt
which
attendance?
classes are playing.
Yeah,
but I know Gladbrook, Rhinebeck's in the area. They're in it. I don't know if there's any others that are, but
yeah. Well,
some out of the Iowa City area.
I think
maybe there isn't. Well, LaPorte City or Union, are they in it?
I'm not sure.
I think they are.
I'm not sure. But I think either way, I think that what you have coming up with that is certainly worthy of being a part of. Iowa State is off to a slow start with a diminished lineup. They didn't have their full lineup by any means. Earl Hall was out, among others. Yeah, South Dakota State, North Dakota State. Early in the season, they had the Harold Nichols Cyclone Open. So, I mean, the trend is Iowa State typically starts slow.
They do.
And I think this is a trend that we've seen. They didn't have their full lineup, so I'm going to be interested to see once they get all the guys healthy and the guys that KJ wants in the lineup to see where they are, because they're certainly not that team. They're certainly not that team, but they have a lot of room to develop and grow. And getting Patrick Downey down from 197 to 184 I think is going to be important, and just keeping him there solid and just getting the right people in the right place. University of Iowa had pretty much almost a shutout. They had 9 champions at the Luther Open. What you would expect, and I commend Iowa for how they start their season, in that they build on competition, and they kind of always early season wrestling's a little bit drab. And they're not clicking right where they want to be. So I think doing this and then having the Iowa City
football, they do that in basketball.
They do, but some don't. I mean, some start out swinging and get good competition right away. And it's a little different from last year with that grapple on the gridiron where you had Oklahoma State coming in. That's a big time meet right away.
Definitely.
But they had the Luther Open. They have the Iowa City duels where they're going to wrestle Iowa Central and Cornell. They'll wax those teams.
Did you go to the Luther Open?
I did not. I just saw some results, and what you would expect: a lot of pins, a lot of bonus points, a lot of Iowa domination on that championship side of the bracket. So it was just everything you would hope you would see out of an Iowa performance at this stage. Sure. But it is interesting with where the rankings are, because Oklahoma State has a lot of buzz right now, preseason buzz, and for good reason. But I don't see Oklahoma State as being that team that necessarily has a guy that you can count on to even make the finals. Dean Hiles there at 141, but he wins close matches, and so he's not a dominant force, whereas you go down the lineup with Ohio State, I'm going to say guaranteed that Kyle Snyder is going to win at heavyweight. I'd say Penn State has a guaranteed.
Monticello is at 33 this year?
He's at 33, but I'm not saying he's guaranteed to make it to the finals. I think Penn State, you have a guaranteed NCAA champion, Zane Rutherford. I think Iowa has a guaranteed finalist. I think at least Corey Clark or Thomas Gilman will make the finals. And so I don't know that I necessarily say that about Iowa. Missouri, I'm guaranteeing that Jaden Cox wins at 197. So I'm giving you 3 guarantees there of national champions. I think,
which makes it harder for somebody else to pick up another one.
Yeah, so it is hard. Of course, you can score points there if you're another team. That's not going to diminish Oklahoma State's chances of getting points, but you like to push guys to the finals and get champions.
Minnesota set that bar. They won a national championship without champion.
They did, but that was to me that was an aberration more than anything. Where you do need team depth. Don't get me wrong, and that's how Oklahoma State's going to win it. They need guys to come through consistently, and they're not going to be the team that has 3 NCAA champions. I think they'll be lucky to get a couple guys to the finals, Oklahoma State, or even have a champion. And so you're right, though, is that Oklahoma State's blueprint to win is team depth, and I think that they have it. But so does Penn State, especially with what they have and who could potentially be in the lineup. Because, hey, that's the MO on Penn State is that they know how to score points. And listen to Cale Sanderson's interview that he did with Penn State Live. As he said, we don't really care about winning. We want to develop a culture and a mentality that we're out here to score points and put on the style. And he caught himself. He said, winning, we'd rather have you lose and do it the right way. He said, well, he goes, I don't want you to lose. So he kind of caught himself, but you get the point of what Cale's trying to say. He's articulating a message that we're out there to perform and live up to our style. And if a win comes out of it, and a dominant win is what they really want, then that's even better. And I think that's really a big reason behind the success of Penn State. And we get to talk to Jeff Byers about that rationale and what he thinks about that. But it seems like that's similar to what you think and how you view the sport. It's
always performance as far as I'm concerned. It's not a war.
Yeah.
It's performance.
And I think that Cale buys into that. I putting words into his mouth maybe, but I think that listening to what he has to say about how he coaches his team, that's what he wants to see out of it. That it's more about, hey, we want more substance. We want this to be a true competition where we go out and extend our leads.
An adrenaline rush for all you fans.
That's right. We get to talk all about Penn State wrestling with one of my favorite guests coming up. He's the voice of Penn State wrestling. His name's Jeff Byers. He's next on the mat.
Football, basketball, baseball, hockey, and more. We've got it all covered here on 1650 The Fan.
We are back on the mat, 1650 The Fan. I'm Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, along with Doug Van Gelder. Doug, I love this guest. We have him on every year. He's the voice of Penn State wrestling, and he always gives us great insight on a program that is doing historic things. They've won 5 out of the last 6 Division I NCAA wrestling championships. His name's Jeff Byers. He knows more about Penn State wrestling than anyone. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hey, I mean, you got to be excited about what's coming up this season. You lost a little bit with Nico Megaludis and a couple other people, but you guys seem to fill the gaps all the time. I'm assuming you're excited about what's coming up.
Yeah, no doubt. Every season to me is exciting, and certainly with this Penn State team, I really think this team has a chance to be Cal's best team yet in terms of top-to-bottom balance. I think they, depending on how things ultimately sort out at 197 here, I think this is a team that feels it has a All-American contender at the very least at all 10 weight classes, and probably feels like it has a national title contender in at least 4 and perhaps as many as 6 weight classes.
I wish I was good enough to save the anticipation and ask this question last, but I'm too excited. I've got to ask what Mark Hall is going to do at 174. Is he going to redshirt, or is he going to compete? Fill us in on what you know.
Yeah, the plan is certainly to redshirt him. The expectation and the plan is to redshirt him. That does not preclude the possibility of him being pulled off of redshirt if circumstances dictate. But I think this coaching staff feels pretty comfortable and pretty confident with the team it has with Mark Hall redshirting, and I think they feel like Hall using a redshirt year can help him like it did a David Taylor or an Ed Ruth in terms of really setting up a great career. But he obviously could be very competitive as a true freshman here. I'm not ruling out the possibility that he could end up in the lineup. But right now, as we sit here today with no injuries at the moment at 174 of note, it would be very, very surprising to see Mark Hall in a Penn State singlet at any time this season.
So Gino Morelli's the guy during the Stanford duel. Is he going to be the guy the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think if he continues to compete the way he did this opening weekend, I think he will be. He and Shakur Rashid are very, very close in the room. Morelli won a sudden victory decision in the initial wrestle-off to set the lineup for that opening weekend. They'll both be going to the Keystone Classic on Sunday, and this coaching staff likes to use the results of tournaments like that more than even wrestle-offs in the room, because you see how these guys stack up against outside competition and how they compete when the lights are on. So, Morelli is certainly not locked in as the starter by any stretch, but I really liked what I saw from him this past weekend, and I think the coaches did too, in terms of the way he competed, especially on Sunday. I think he was maybe a little tight at times on Friday night, but I think Sunday he really went out and wrestled very, very well. So it's going to be a very close competition between he and Rashid, I think, throughout the season for that starting role, and I think it may go back and forth a couple of times before it's ultimately settled. But I think Penn State feels very comfortable, very confident that either of those young men are certainly capable of getting on the podium in St. Louis.
How does Mark Hall look so far? He won his opening tournament, but what have you heard from the coaches on where he is as far as progress and being that guy?
Yeah, I think the thing the coaches, I think, love is he is a guy that is very humble and is willing to try some new things in practice. He's truthfully, he's taken his lumps in some of the practices, but David Taylor took his lumps those first few months in the wrestling room as well. But what you're looking for more than whether or not the guy is just whipping up on everybody in the room, and Mark Hall is not doing that, is he learning, is he developing? And there's no question when you watch Mark just from week to week here, he is picking up little things, adding to his arsenal, figuring out some things that college wrestlers do a little better or at least a little differently than maybe what he's seen even in the international competition that he's had previously. So I think they're very, very pleased with his progress, and he is a guy that he knows how to compete. And again, I think he would be competitive with anybody in the country this year, and certainly if he can get this redshirt season under his belt, I think they feel very confident about how he'll stack up with the rest of the country next year. But he's taken some lumps, and he's definitely it's a learning curve, but he is just such a smart kid and a savvy wrestler that it is not taking him very long to pick up on some of the little nuances that he needs to change.
We're on the line with Jeff Byers, the voice of Penn State Wrestling. Of course, we're talking about Penn State Wrestling and the lineup of the defending NCAA wrestling champions in Division I. And the guy that a lot of people are excited about that is really driving the Penn State program, from my point of view, is Zane Rutherford. Just when you think you can't get another David Taylor or someone that dominant, you get a Zane Rutherford in the program. How does he continue to get better?
To be honest with you, Kyle, he is just a guy that is so driven to compete and to succeed. And he really is one of those kids that just loves going to the wrestling room and loves learning, tries to challenge himself every day, and is by no means satisfied. He's a guy that has his eyes on the future, he ultimately wants to be a world champion, an Olympic champion, and so he realizes there's a long ways to go for him to get to that stage, and that his continued development is going to be critical to that. So he really does add a little something to his game every day. He loves competing in this room with the other kids that he has to work with. When you watch him and Jason North go at it in live action, I don't know that you're going to get any better wrestling anywhere in the country at any time this season than watching those two go at it in the room. But Zane is just a very composed kid, a very driven kid, and just somebody that seems to always make the right choice, do the right thing, and there's certainly no satisfaction with, okay, I got one national title, now I can rest on my laurels. He's just a kid that is always looking to improve, and again, he just loves the sport so much that I think he genuinely looks forward to what opportunities may arise every day he's in the room, and every day he gets a chance to compete or learn from fellow teammates or coaches.
Bo Nickel was a runner-up at 174 pounds last season at the NCAA wrestling tournament. He's up to 184 this year. Why the move up?
He wanted to make the move up. I think the coaches were fully anticipating that he would stay at 174, and I think Bo just felt like he wanted to go up and challenge himself a little bit. He won't say, and I don't know that Miles Martin moving up drove him at all, but it sure feels like that was at least a factor. I think the fact that Gabe Dean is up there was a reason also. Bo Nickel is one of those kids that instead of looking for the easiest path, truly wants the path of greatest resistance, and I think the opportunity to compete in such a loaded weight class and make even more of a name for himself by winning that weight class than he would at 174 this year was at least a factor. But I also just think he felt his body was growing, and with his weight training that the move up was just kind of a natural move as well. I just think he feels more comfortable this season at 184, and he certainly looks to be every bit as big as he needs to be to handle the weight class this season.
He seems like an interesting guy. Is he a guy that this season, or maybe when he gets junior, senior, that he can carry the sport like a Ben Askren did when you just want to go and drive and see the guy compete? Can he be that guy?
I don't think there's any question he can be that guy. He's just, he competes in a lot of different ways, and he enjoys beating people in a lot of different ways. And he is obviously a very articulate young man and very thoughtful. I mean, he really loves the sport, but he loves and thrives on the competition. And I really do think that the bigger the match, the bigger the stage, the more on he is, the more excited he gets. And he's very consistent. It's not that he's not there on the days when the stage isn't big, but I do think he likes rising to the occasion and likes challenging himself day in and day out. And yeah, with the style of wrestling he has, with the throws that he's capable of throwing on anybody at any point, he is certainly a guy that I think even at this stage of his career, you want to watch, that eyes just kind of automatically get trained to if he's out there competing in a tournament.
We are on the mat with Jeff Byers, the voice of Penn State Wrestling. We're talking about the Penn State Wrestling program, and the leader of that program is Cale Sanderson, head wrestling coach there, 159-0 in college at Iowa State, and a guy that I like his philosophy. Doug and I were talking about that in the first segment, that it really doesn't seem like he stresses wins and losses. He stresses more the style that he comes out. How does he articulate that message to his team?
Yeah, Kyle, it is one of the most impressive things to me about Cale. It is one thing to say that stuff and to say that you're, especially early in the season, not worried about winning or losing. You're more worried about how your kids go out and compete. But I can tell you, I mean, I've witnessed firsthand a kid win a 3-2 match, and Cale Sanderson absolutely laid into the kid because he was upset that the kid didn't wrestle. He didn't go out and do the things he was capable of and the things they've been working on in practice, and he didn't feel like it was entertaining for the fans. And I've seen him absolutely praise and congratulate a young man who lost a fairly decisive match. I think the score was like 14-10 or 14-9. And Cal said, "Man, that is exactly what we wanted to see. You keep wrestling like that, and at the end of the season, you're going to find yourself on the podium." And I mean, he's the guy that truly does live what he preaches, and makes sure that he backs up the words that he gives to his wrestlers with the. Again, he'll praise effort over results every day of the week, and it is why you see these kids respond in the room. They love that they have a coach that wants them to go out and be aggressive and isn't going to get on them for giving up even a 6-point throw. If you get caught in a 6-point throw because you went for a 6-point throw, Cale's going to live with that every time. He'd much rather have that than have a kid go out there and again win a 2-1 match because he just kept his opponent from getting in on his legs. That just is not what Cale wants to see in wrestling. It's not how he thinks the sport can grow, and you know he wants to win. I mean, make no mistake about that. But he believes the way you win is by going out and wrestling exciting, aggressive style, and that ultimately will draw more fans to the sport as well, which will help the sport, not just his program, survive and thrive.
Cale seems like a likable guy. Does he have the Gable-esque aura about him that when he walks into a restaurant in State College that people are turning their heads and saying that's Cale Sanderson, oh my goodness? I mean, what kind of aura does he exude in State College?
Yeah, there's definitely an appreciation. I mean, the fans around here, and even non-wrestling fans, are aware of who Cale Sanderson is in this town and what he is accomplishing. And there's no question when you see him out and about, and he's not a guy that gets out a whole lot. You don't see him at a lot of public events in town. But when he is out, going to the grocery store with his wife or kids, as he'll do on occasion, people will just stop and say thank you or congratulate him, and he is as gracious with his time as I think anybody I've ever seen. Honestly, I don't know that I've ever seen him turn down a photograph or an autograph request, and there have been some times where he probably should have and needed to with time constraints, but it's just not in his nature. And again, it goes back to he really is in this for the right reasons, in that he wants to grow the sport, wants to make it an exciting sport for fans to watch, and part of that is, as uncomfortable as I think he still is with his celebrity, he understands that he does play a big role in that growth, and that if a fan has a bad experience with him, it may leave a bad taste about the sport. And I cannot imagine anybody ever having a bad experience having approached Cale Sanderson.
What's your relationship like with him? Are you guys strictly professional, or have you gotten to be friends?
That's an interesting question. I would consider us friends, but it's not as though we hang out on the weekends, and I've been to his house a couple of times, but it's been in a professional capacity, one way or another. And so, again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we're buddies, but I do think he's somebody that would have my back. He's a very loyal individual, and he certainly fosters or breeds that loyalty in return. And I certainly have the utmost respect for him, and again, not just the way he coaches wrestling. It's the way he lives his life. It's the family that he has developed and raised, and I just cannot imagine a more impressive human being to be around in every sense than Cale Sanderson. And truthfully, it's just it's a privilege and an honor just to know him. And again, I guess it is largely a professional relationship, but I think we have enough trust in one another that if there was a situation where we needed to call upon one or another outside of the professional realm, would be comfortable doing that.
On the line with Jeff Byers, the voice of Penn State Wrestling. We just have a couple minutes here. We've talked about the finalists that you had last year that are returning this year in Jason Nolf, Zane Rutherford, Bo Nickel. Of the 7 remaining weight classes, who's the guy that we need to be watching this season?
Boy, to pick just one with this team, it would be tough. I do think that guy that is raising eyebrows very quickly here is Nick Soriano, and it's certainly not studying development, even though he's a true freshman given his undefeated high school record. But Nick is a kid that he has a different style than Nico Megaludis, but he has very much the same mentality that Nico had, in that he just absolutely hates to lose, and I think he's driven by just that, the thought of possibly losing. And he is a guy that, even as a true freshman, just seems to have a tremendous understanding of what he needs to do to go out and compete at this level. He's really remarkable with his mat skills, both top and bottom. But again, I'm hesitant to pick just one kid because I do think Jared Cortez is a very dynamic wrestler here at 133. I think we'll see what happens with Matt McCutcheon up at 197, but I think there's some potential there as he continues to develop and get a little stronger, that by season's end he could become a force at that weight. And I think Nick Neville at heavyweight is certainly a kid that's going to be fun to watch. He's just a little different style, a little more aggressive than I think a lot of the heavyweights out there.
All right, this has been a lot of fun. I'm sure that you haven't gotten tired of winning championships, and looks like you have a great opportunity this season. But thanks for taking the time. Always love getting your insight. And as we mentioned, we have probably another 20 minutes or so that we could have talked, but we're out of time, and we'll have you on again soon.
Sounds great. I always enjoy it. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, that was Jeff Byers, the voice of Penn State Wrestling. Up next, we have a guy that went to Wartburg College that happens to live in Colorado, Craig Sesker, author of a new book. Next, on the mat.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When all you want is sports, all you need is 1650 The Fan.
We are back on the mat, 1650 The Fan. I'm Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, along with Doug Van Gelder. Our next guest wrote a book I think Doug called his favorite book on Bobby Douglas. I don't know if you remember saying that, but I sure do. So hopefully that holds true because the author is with us. He's written a new book called Wrestle Like a Girl. I know that we've both been advocates of female wrestling, and certainly...
Me longer than you.
Well, yeah, because you're older than me. That's exactly why. But Craig Sesker, the author of the book Wrestle Like a Girl, is with us. How are you, Craig?
I'm good. How are you doing, guys?
Hey, great to have you on. I know that you went to Wartburg and ran track there. I think you got your 800-meter time down to maybe 1:45. Is that about right?
I probably had about 100 meters left, probably 1:45.
Probably. So you are probably too flat. Is that what's your PR in the 8?
Yeah, the 400 is more of my race. But in high school, I think I ran too flat. They put me on the 4x8, kicking and screaming. I was more of a 400 on down, more of a sprinter.
And as we look back, Wartburg College, a program that you attended and are familiar with, going way back a few years ago, the New York Times article, the front page New York Times article that ran on Augsburg and Wartburg, you were behind that. Tell us how you were able to kind of get that story to the forefront.
Well, I had worked with Greg Bishop, who did the story, and he covered wrestling at the Olympics in Beijing in 2008, and so he followed, of course, Henry Cejudo when he won the gold medal in China, and Greg and I had a pretty good relationship. I don't know how much of a role I had in what he ended up doing, but I know he did call me, and he said, "You won't guess where I'm at right now. I'm in Waverly, Iowa," which was kind of funny. And I think he was actually at Joe's Nighthawk at the time, and one of the great landmarks up there. So yeah, Greg did a phenomenal job on the rivalry between Wartburg and Augsburg, and it was, an article that obviously was, merited with what both programs have done.
And when you think about it, it is still remarkable because that streak is still going. It's still relevant that both programs have kept that going since '94. What do you think has gone into that? I mean, why do you think those programs are still in that streak going now?
Well, just the longevity of Swenson and Miller, and now Eric Keller, and what Augsburg came back and won a title a couple of years ago, and just the tradition and the programs are important, and the athletic departments obviously put a lot into wrestling, which isn't always the case at some schools, unfortunately, and so it's just it's really a neat deal. Just success breeds success, and a young athlete wants a chance to go to a great school, get a great education, and then have a great experience in wrestling. You can't beat what those two schools offer.
On the mat with Craig Sesker, author of a new book, Wrestle Like a Girl. Before we get to that, I want to go back to your first book, the Bobby Douglas book, and just the journey that it took to get to that point of writing a book, getting it completed, and having a successful product.
Say that again, Kyle.
Well, just with the Bobby Douglas book, all that went into that, all that transpired, what did it take to just complete that book, get a finished product, and then know it's successful?
Bobby had a great story. I knew that. I didn't realize how great it was until we started talking. And if you know Bobby, he's kind of all over the map sometimes with what his thoughts are, and he'll be talking about one thing, then he leads to another. And a lot of the best stories came out not when we were doing interviews, but just like one time we'd done an interview in Ames, and we were walking to our cars, and then he just made a comment about a wrestler that did something, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Then that led to a great story on a wrestler named Chip Park who forgot his wrestling shoes at the hotel when NCAs were in Ames, and Bobby himself went back to get the shoes, and Bobby said he was sliding across the parking lot wearing cowboy boots, almost fell down, and had to hustle in and get the shoes to Chip. And then Chip Park went on a huge run in the wrestlebacks, won a bunch of matches, and came up, got third place, and helped Arizona State win the national title. But Bobby Douglas, he's made a tremendous impact on wrestling. He's still involved with the sport, and he did a lot at the collegiate level, and then, of course, internationally, he was a great wrestler himself in his own right. Had a pretty big impact on Dan Gable. They wrestled each other, and then obviously he coached at the international level. He was the Olympic coach for probably the best United States Olympic team of all time, the '92 team in Barcelona. With John Smith and Kevin Jackson, and so he's great to work with, and he just obviously has a great story.
Your most recent book, Wrestle Like a Girl, of course, is about female wrestling and just the journey that female wrestlers have taken to get to this point. Start at the end. Helen Maroulis wins an Olympic gold medal in Rio, a really groundbreaking event for wrestling in the United States. What has that done for female wrestling, if you can quantify it? Have you seen the results on what that has done for female wrestlers, Helen Maroulis winning that gold medal?
Not yet. I think it's going to remain to be seen down the road. I think it's, obviously it's going to open a lot of doors for the sport. I think, when people learn that story and say, hey, an American girl can win an Olympic gold medal. And I think it's starting to resonate because Helen's gotten quite a bit of national attention. I saw she just wrote an article for Sports Illustrated. She's been in USA Today. She was on the Today Show the day after she won down in Rio. And Helen's come a long way as a wrestler and a person. And she's very well spoken now. She's a really good ambassador for the sport. And just to do it the way she did it, beating who I still think is the best female wrestler of all time, Yoshida of Japan. I still think she's the best ever. And to beat her in the Olympic finals, to give the U.S. its first Olympic gold medal, which was long overdue. I mean, Sarah McMahon almost did it 12 years before. But, just a tremendous accomplishment, and the timing was perfect. And for us, my co-author Jamie Moffat and I, we obviously, that's kind of how we had built the book. The book was written except for the last chapter, and we were really hopeful that we were going to have an Olympic champion in Rio.
And you did, and that was a nice ending to the book. But throughout the book, you profile different female wrestlers who have made a contribution. The one that probably resonated the most with me was Lee Jane's story, just in how she really used wrestling as a platform to overcome a lot in her life. Fill our audience in on Lee Jane's and really what her story was and how wrestling was influential in that.
Well, she came from a pretty rough background, and she had, been put into a home, like a group home for kids that get in trouble, and she'd had a lot of different obstacles growing up, and she didn't seem to have much direction in her life, and she was kind of this, tough-talking, wrong side of the tracks girl, and then she was on a retreat with the wrestling coach. Happened to be on the retreat, and the wrestling coach said, "Yeah, you wouldn't last, a day or 5 minutes or whatever in the wrestling room," and kind of hit home with her. And then she ran into the coach in school a few days later, and she said, "Is that offer still good for me to come in and try to wrestle?" And he said, "Absolutely, it is." And so she came into the wrestling room and gave wrestling a try, and I believe she was, started a little bit later than some of the girls. I think she was already in high school. And then basically started to get good at wrestling, got a scholarship offer to college, to Missouri Valley. She got her degree. She got her bachelor's degree and master's degree, and then came to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, and she ended up joining the U.S. Army WCAP program and made 3 world teams. And then, 2 years, a little over 2 years after having a baby, she won a medal at the World Championships, which is just an incredible capper to a pretty remarkable story.
We are on the mat with Craig Sesker, author of the new book, Wrestle Like a Girl, one of the female wrestlers that is the face of the sport still. Adeline Gray had a disappointing Rio finish, did not place at the Olympics, but still has a lot of opportunity to continue on. Where do you see her role in female wrestling as we go forward?
She's been the best ambassador that we've had for the women, and she still is. And she was tremendous leading up to the Olympics. She's really loves working with these young girls, and she's just a tremendous role model for these young athletes. And she's just extremely articulate, well-spoken, just really does a great job with the media. And quite frankly, I thought she was done wrestling, and I was surprised. She wrestled at the New York AC tournament this past weekend and won it. And so I haven't spoken to her since the Olympics, but, I hope she sticks with it. I mean, she's a great champion. She's won 3 world titles, 2 other world medals. And, I think she's 25 years old, and some women get out of it pretty early, because they want to start families and, maybe move on with their lives. But I think she's got a lot left to give, and Helen Maroulis is planning on still competing. But I hope Adeline sticks with it, and I'd love to see her get another chance at the Olympics.
Where is women's wrestling right now as far as public perception?
I think, Kyle, it's just a lot of people still don't know if women's wrestling is in the Olympics. When I was working on this book, just talking to different people, I'd say, I'm writing a book on women's wrestling, and they'd kind of look at you like, women's wrestling. So it's been in 4 Olympics. I think one of the cool things about this book, I think we can bring a little more awareness to the public in terms of, recognizing these women, seeing that, these women's wrestlers can be heroes. They can inspire other people, maybe to pursue that type of path. And so it's, I think less than 5% of USA Wrestling's membership is female. And it's growing, but not at a super fast rate. So I think the fact that it is in the Olympics obviously legitimizes it, and makes it something pretty tangible for these girls to aspire to. But it's still one of those things where, not a lot of people know about it. I think it's gained a lot of traction, though, in terms of being accepted. I think at first a lot of the men were kind of taken aback by it, but I think now and the quality of the wrestlers, the elite wrestlers. I mean, Helen Maroulis technically is outstanding, and Yoshida and some of these other girls, they are very, very good wrestlers.
Give us a plug. Where can we buy the book? I want to make sure we get that in there because we just want to make sure if anyone wants to buy the book, they know where to go about it.
Sally Roberts, who started that organization, Wrestle Like a Girl, we've partnered with Sally, and it's for sale on her website, which is wrestlelikeagirl.org.
Okay. And all the information's right there as far as just purchasing it?
Yes, just to get on the website, and again, wrestlelikeagirl.org. And I just want to give a shout-out to Jamie Moffat. He brought me on to work with him on this project, and it's the second book we've done together, and something I'm proud of. It's something I wanted to do for quite some time, and I think there's some really neat stories, some really compelling and interesting stories about some of these great champions.
Craig Sesker, it's been great having you on. Hopefully you make it back to Iowa for some of the wrestling meets. I know you're from Tipton. You're a Tipton Tiger, so hopefully we get to see you in the great state of Iowa soon.
All right. Thank you, Kyle.
All right. Appreciated having Craig Sesker on. Hopefully Doug will partake in reading another Craig Sesker book and checking out.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's well worth the book, and I think that as we've both discussed in the past, that this is a great opportunity for female wrestlers and great opportunity for our sport because we need female wrestlers in the sport. I hope that you will all enjoy a Hershey Sundae pie. I know that Doug did. I know that Scott did. And get yourself down to Burger King. There's enough here in Cedar Falls, Waterloo, and other places in the nation to give it a shot. For Doug Van Gelder and Scott Fensloff and Craig Sesker and Jeff Byers, you've been listening to On the Mat on 1650 The Fan.
You've been listening to On the Mat, the Cedar Valley's longest-running radio show devoted entirely to wrestling. Brought to you by Rolling Ford and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum on 1650 The Fan.
This show is part of the Mat Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MatTalkOnline.com.